Jim stepped out there for a second. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. How's everybody?
Well, hope you're doing well. Jim, good morning.
Good morning.
So-
I shouted good morning back, but I didn't realize I was muted.
I did that to start the morning as well. So I believe we've got a quorum, Julie. Is that correct? We're ready to get started?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hope everybody's summer is starting well. As some of you might have heard when we first got started, I've started mine with a broken air conditioner, so I'm probably going to be the technician a little bit later this morning. But Keith had recommended I open a YouTube video and see if I can't mull my way through that part. But so I would say, let's see. I'm gonna reserve some comments or conversation to a little bit later in the morning when we start talking about ITSB roadmap and future plans. And so I think we'll just try to jump in on committee updates and go from there. Joe, can you start us off?
I'd be happy to. Can you all hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. So the Digital Transformation Committee has had 2 meetings since the full board last met, one in April and one in May. And in April, we spent most of our time discussing AI and Gen AI in particular. And Keith did a great job of walking us through the state's guiding principles and a risk framework related to usage, including the use of AI being called out in new contracts via an enterprise process, which we found interesting. We had some discussions about governance and strategies to ensure adherence to the guidelines. We also got an update on chatbot and accessibility at the April meeting. The DIT statewide IT procurement implemented chatbot back in March. And then NC.gov will be next, and potentially some others. Done extensive amount of testing to ensure the system knows its limits and doesn't provide any inaccurate information. But it sounds like that's going really well. We also talked about the progress of rolling out PayIt. So for DEQ, the PTP erosion and sediment system is now using PayIt. Brownfields was targeted for May. And for local government, we have 3 counties using it, more to come online. And then DOT had an immediate need for PayIt in terms of proofing and vetting. And that's going to be a follow-up item going forward to see at the state level. There's a work group being put together for identity proofing. In terms of funding updates, there's no additional funding that was received. So the DIT group is going to enter an expansion budget request. We also got an update on automation at the April meeting, primarily with UiPath. So there was a lot of training around the automation and some good updates there. The hope there is to enable some smaller agencies to move toward automation and allow staff to tackle more higher level work. Also, in May, we talked a lot about Copilot enablement with Microsoft and how that's going to be leveraged across the state, some of the implications around cost and licensing. A valuable tool, but like most organizations, trying to figure out where appropriate usage would bring the most value, especially given the additional cost. And then we spent a lot of time on the data classification project. We got a really good update on that, an explanation of how the group is reviewing current tools, underlying policies, how will data classification move forward, what will the data handling guidelines be, vendors being evaluated, the roadmap is being created. And then we had sort of an open discussion on what's the best way to ensure adherence to those policies. This is one that's probably a combination of some tools and a lot of end user education. So we just had sort of an open discussion, ideation on that. And then lastly, we got an update on the constituent portal communications and marketing strategy. We're working with a firm to put together some storyboards and a video, and that will be shared at our next meeting. And the goal here is to really help drive home understanding and value of the constituent portals by sort of showing the art of the possible. So showing some different scenarios about how they would be used. The hope is that this would bring about some additional funding and support for the constituent portal development. And I believe those are the highlights from our last two meetings, and others feel free to jump in if I left out anything important.
That was great, Joe. A very good review, and I agree with all of it.
All right, thank you.
Joe, do you mind if, just for my clarification, so was it for Pay It that you all are gonna pursue an expansion request? Or did I miss it?
That's a good question. I thought it was more general. Can somebody help me out with that?
No, to be for the constituent engagement portal. Pay It receives their money through the convenience fee, so there's no one-time cost associated with Pay It.
Okay.
Thank you, Glenn.
And one thing to note too, and I don't know if anybody saw it in the House bill, there was a constituent engagement section there with a couple $1 million, I believe it was, for starting with, I guess, Secretary of State.
Thank you.
Joe, thank you for that update. That being the case, no questions for Joe, then Keith, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with cybersecurity?
Sure, happy to. Good morning, everybody. Like the previous report, we've had two meetings since the last full board meeting. The Cybersecurity and Privacy Committee met both in April and May. In our April meeting, we were primarily looking at generative AI. We kind of covered off on about 4 specific topics in the meeting. First being generative AI and the AI framework. The committee reviewed and discussed the recent updates to the AI framework and the fact that they have added a workforce empowerment section to focus more on innovation. So I think there are now 7 principles rather than the original 6 included in the framework. The second was privacy updates. Cherie, as a new deputy, has been hired. I mentioned a new deputy has been hired who has a good deal of experience in privacy. There are still 3 positions that remain unfilled. The privacy impact assessment is in progress and the fair impact principles have been developed. On the cybersecurity front, Tori shared that the dates and location of the cybersecurity symposium have been set for December in Raleigh. The cyber grant activities have wrapped up and final recommendations will be sent out shortly. Updates on the county SOC pilot program were shared, and so far everything is very positive. And the last was the education pathways internships updates. We wanted to share that the numbers and data are being collected in order to show the committee the impact in the near future. In the May meeting, primarily, again, looking at AI within the cybersecurity context and kind of covering off on 2 areas. The group had a discussion at a very high level on the pertinent AI tools. This discussion included both the positive and negative aspects of some well-known tools and how DIT is accessing how these tools and identifying risk. Cybersecurity updates, the internship program is wrapping up, and overall the ESRMO feels like they have been a positive experience across the board. The interns have been trained at the FEMA level and have been getting certified. So that is my updates. I'd welcome Cherie or Tori to add any color to my updates. Well, with that, Rocky,
I was just
Go
going to
ahead,
say,
Sure.
yeah, so we are progressing with the data classification project, and we've gotten our requirements. We are almost have that finalized and are moving on next to the requests for pricing. We're working on creating an assessment checklist for the use of generative AI in contracts. We're working with Jonathan and some of the DOJ lawyers. And in fact, we've already met about that and have been putting into place some of that. What else? Also, we are streamlining the PTA and the privacy threshold analysis and then privacy impact assessment. So usually it's, and probably people on this call have heard me say this before, the privacy threshold analysis is essentially your first look. Like if you were to walk into the door of a place and you're looking around, maybe you're buying a house and you say, here's the problems. And then the privacy impact assessment is that deeper look of what all the issues are. So we've worked with security and agreed to move a bunch of the security questions that were in there into the PIA. So the PTA will be a shorter one and it'll be easier for people to do. And then that will automatically kick off the PIA so that will streamline things and make it easier. We're also developing aspects of that. We currently have 2 questions that would be hitting on generative AI now, and we are working out a streamline for that will be able to address more in depth issues like bias and reliability and things like that for looking at generative AI. And I think that's where we are right now with all of that. Thank you.
Well, with that, Rocco, I think that concludes our report.
Keith, thanks very much. Appreciate that. Joe and Keith, I know that we had worked on trying to schedule a joint meeting related to discussion for AI, generative AI. I know that Paige had circulated something to see if we could get folks on board with that. At this point, either of you know, or can Paige give us an update? Do we have anything scheduled at this point, or are we still working on that?
We do have a meeting scheduled. It's scheduled for July 25th. Is that the date we landed on?
I think
And a
that,
meeting invite
Yeah.
should be coming out shortly.
July 25th from 11:30 to 1.
Yes.
Okay.
with many thanks to Paige, I think she had to go through about 3 iterations to finally land on a date.
Been like herding cats, huh? Okay.
A little bit, but we got it.
Good. So, okay, next we have, I'm going to ask Gerald to speak here on a project that he has been working on now for quite some time. And then I think that conversation is going to give way to another conversation about spinning up really an education pathway committee that we're going to ask Gerald to see if he can chair for us. And Keith, obviously you and I have spoken. I appreciate your willingness to participate. Patrick, you don't know this, but you got volunteered to also participate in that. And we'll have some follow-up conversation on that as well. But Gerald, tell us what you got going on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the Great Grant, BEAD, and CAB funds getting ready to hit the streets, the demand for fiber and conduit is going through the roof, as well as the need for skilled laborers to install it. I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you about the fiber infrastructure technician training and apprenticeship program that Stanley Community College in Albemarle is developing. The college's plan was primarily orchestrated by 4 individuals familiar with the networking industry. One was your chairman, Dr. Rocco DeSanto. He's also the owner of Broadplex, a company specializing in the deployment of fiber optic cable. And he was instrumental in walking our group through the actual process of installing fiber from shovel all the way to the home or business. This included subjects like the operation of horizontal drilling equipment and other heavy equipment operation, utilities location, the process of inserting the cable into the conduit, fusion cable splicing, and job site safety. Our second member, Mr. Jim Hillier, former CIO of Stanley Community College and then later CIO of Central Piedmont. He was one of the key players in establishing Stanley Community College as one of the top IT training facilities in the country. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And the leading Cisco Academy. It was so successful, in fact, that then Cisco Systems CEO John Chambers took the time to personally visit and see how they did it. Jim couldn't have accomplished all this without the insight and direction of our third member, Communication Workers of America training and curriculum expert, Kevin Salata. Kevin was the one who actually developed the coursework for Stanley because he knew what the big players in communication needed and wanted. Then finally, myself, I currently serve on the Stanley Community College Board of Trustees and am a longtime University and Community College professor of information technology. And until my retirement in 2017, I owned and operated Uwari Technology and IT Solutions Company. Although our program is designed to cover all the layers of the OSI model, from the physical layer to the application layer, for funding purposes and ease of administration, we've broken it down into two training components. One, shovel to DMARC, and then two, DMARC to application. And I'll try to explain this. Shovel to DMARC is the area of training that's currently most underserved across the state and is our primary focus of attention. That's where fiber installation crews plow conduit into the ground, string it on utility poles, or tunnel it in the ground using horizontal directional drilling rigs. These rigs can cost anywhere between $350,000 and $650,000, depending on how they're configured. Happily, I learned 2 weeks ago from Rocco that Vermeer, the leading manufacturer of horizontal drilling equipment, is donating a rig to the college along with simulators. And it's our guess that Vermeer's main competitor, Ditch Witch, will also follow suit and donate equipment for training. SCC already has a line worker program and heavy equipment operation program that will fit perfectly with the new curriculum certifications that we're developing. As far as the DMARC to application training component is concerned, most all of the courseware has already been developed and is being successfully used to train network engineers and technicians. Stanley, let me tell you a little bit about it. Stanley is a Cisco Academy Support Center, supporting 257 high schools, community colleges, and universities in 22 states and multiple countries. Their Train the Trainer program has turned out over 2,000 instructors, myself being one of them. If you're a Cisco trainer in North Carolina, there's about a 90% chance you were taught by Stanley Community College. They're also a regional VMware Academy, turning out 300 to 400 people skilled in computer virtualization every 8 weeks. And Stanley is a regional Palo Alto networking academy. And really, at this point, I should mention that housed in the Whitley Technology Center building is a $1 million data center that hosts thousands of online courses and simulations for Cisco, VMware, and Palo Alto. They were the first college in the United States to be allowed to offer Cisco training online. These guys don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, offering a true hands-on experience. I can't imagine a school with better resources and instructors than Stanley Community College to house our new fiber optic technician apprenticeship program. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Gerald, I don't have, well, maybe I do have a question. That was fascinating. Very interesting. Thank you for that.
You're
I would be
welcome.
interested, and I didn't know that about Stanley Community College. That's very, very impressive. Question I have is, can you or maybe Rocco talk generally about, is it still the rural areas mostly that are lacking? And like, is there a percentage coverage that we have today as a state? And what's the gap there we're trying to address?
Primarily, the biggest gaps are in the rural area. I'd love to bring a guest in, Doug Dawson, if you're familiar with him, to maybe speak to this, because he has all the facts and the figures and percentages and could give the board a much broader view of what's going on. But the high density areas have long since been pretty much saturated because that's where the money is. So in trying to encourage the ISPs to go out in rural areas has been hard. And that's what our legislature has been trying to do with great grants and the federal government with BEAD, and the CAB funds are being made available so that you have matching funds. But generally, what you just said is correct. Most of the problem or divide is in the rural communities because it's not as profitable for the ISPs.
Right. That was great.
Obviously, Joe, that's where Nate and his group in the broadband division of DIT is obviously working. That's their focus. And they've certainly been doing a whole lot of work trying to get that ready. And I see that the governor, I think I saw that the governor had made an announcement last week. Jim, you might be able to tell us a little bit about that, certain monies did get released recently. Did I see that?
There was a small amount of money that was released. We still are pending legislative language to get passed that will enable us to take what we have in North Carolina so it aligns with what's being required from NTIA. We're not there yet in the passage of that language. I had to step out for a second. I guess my question is, the thought process here would be the community college would be the one who's going to apply for a grant, correct?
Gerald, let you speak to that.
Sorry,
yeah.
Could you repeat that again for me?
Yeah, as far as, right, I'm assuming there's an ask that's going to be made of the BEAD funding, and that would have to come from the institution itself, correct?
That's the way I understand it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
And Jim, I think, as I understood in having conversations with Gerald, that would be, one potential source of funding for this. I don't know that it is the only source of funding that can be asked for. And we did have a conversation with Nate and some of his folks a week or two ago, and they indicated that I think there are actually a couple of other community colleges that are looking to do something related to funding. Don't know if it's fundamentally the same kind of thing that Gerald is looking to champion here, but obviously if there is some portions of those monies available for education, they'd like to try to avail themselves of that to the extent they can.
The thing that we did understand or learn in our meeting with Nate and Emily was that the BEAD workforce, labor workforce grants are not going to, the money is not going to be available for over a year. And that's a problem because, again, the money is going to be hitting the streets before we've had any way to train the labor force. So we're looking at others. I have talked with the people at Golden Leaf, and I'm talking with friends in the legislature. So maybe in the long session, we can get some legislation to fund a pilot program so that if we can get it off the ground at Stanley, then we can roll it out to the other two schools. But we got to get money more sooner than later. In other words, we can't really wait for the BEAD workforce development money to hit the street because it's going to be too late by then.
I'm curious, do you anticipate any challenges getting the number of people you need from the workforce, or do you think there's adequate interest right out of the gate?
There's going to be adequate, yes, because it is. I'm sorry, was somebody speaking?
No, go ahead, Gerald.
The thing is, this is an area, and actually, Rocco can speak to this much better than I can, but the starting salary of some of these people that are very skilled or skilled at running this horizontal directional drilling equipment is upwards of $100,000, and coming right out of high school and going to a community college and making, let's just say, whether it's just below 100,000 or around 100,000. Am I saying this wrong, Rocco? Is that about right?
That's substantially correct, Gerald.
So, you know,
can make that.
And the demand for these, there was a paper I wrote. I asked Paige if she could put it here. It's the executive summary of a paper that I did for Stanley Community College. It outlined the demand for broadband coming up, and there it is right there. And if you got the time to download that and read it, I think it'll explain what the demand was. And it's going to be so easy for these people coming out of school to get jobs because there just aren't anywhere near enough people. I learned from Doug Dawson that the demand for bandwidth, shall we say, increased fivefold from 2019 to today. And he said that most industry experts expect it to increase, or the demand to increase 200-fold by 2029, just 5 years from now. So this isn't, there's going to be a glut, but there's going to be an ongoing demand for this type of job, this labor, this skilled labor.
And Joe, to your point or your question, so, and Gerald is talking obviously about the drill operators, and those fellows sort of sit at the top of the pyramid in terms of what, can be earned in the realm of doing infrastructure placement. But quite literally, it's very difficult to find good work folks to be able to do all the functions that are required to get fiber in the ground, get it lit, and be able to hand it off to the network engineers. And so I envision that this will be an ongoing, that the need will only continue to escalate, certainly as the federal government and the states, all states begin to disperse the monies that are being made available, some 40 to 60 billion, I think, nationally. There's going to be a tremendous strain on the workforce or the ability to find folks to be able to do what needs to be done.
Yeah, it's too bad the funding is lacking the demands so dramatically, but this is awesome. And I'm so excited to hear about Stanley Community College. I'm gonna look that up. I had no idea they had that program. It's really impressive.
We just opened a $13.5 million trade facility as well. So we've got everything. It's just first class is all I can tell you. I can imagine a place that has better personnel, instructors, and has the resources to do all that they do.
Hey, I have one more question and then I'm going to shut up. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but as you were talking, it reminded me, I can't remember who gave us an update on, look at Keith being polite, and here I am just rambling. Somebody came and gave an update to the committee about the shortage of cybersecurity professionals in the state. And there was a program that was being considered around recruiting veterans. Did that ever materialize, or does anybody know what's going on with that?
Can't answer that.
Keith, can you speak to some part of that?
Corey, you want to cover it?
Yeah, either way. So ESRMO does have a veteran apprentice program that is, I think it's 7 or 8 deep. That those basically the way that it's handled is they come into ESRMO and then they are assigned out to different agencies where an agency has requested an apprentice be a part of their program. So it could be at DOT, DPS. They're both heavily utilizing the apprenticeship program. There's several other agencies that are also doing that. ESRMO typically also has one internally at the very least. So that is an active thing that we're doing for cybersecurity and veteran spouses and so on. So it's been a very, very helpful program. A lot of positive that's come out of that we've seen so far.
Thank you.
Keith Briggs, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Gerald and team. I think I really picked up on two things. One, there's a need, and then number two, I think somebody mentioned earlier that there may be some other community colleges in North Carolina that are also looking at a similar capability or program. I'm guessing, or I'm wondering whether or not we think the view of the ITSB and in a committee that focuses on this kind of apprenticeship, is it the goal, or would it be a future goal to learn from what Stanley County is developing and doing to make it more widely available across the state? You know, Stanley County is center of the state, but with classroom training, yet a need potentially on the east or the west. How do we support and facilitate, a broader distribution of opportunity?
Keith, it's a great question. And honestly, that kind of leads into the next part and what I alluded to a little earlier, that we're going to ask Gerald to chair basically a third committee, Education Pathways, and I'm hoping Keith and Patrick are going to help support him. And obviously anybody that is interested in participating in that is welcome. But so we're going to try to make the cookie cutter starting in Stanley, but obviously need to put fiber in the ground in Elizabeth City and in Sylva, North Carolina. And, there's a need all the way across the state. And so the objective will be to see if we can duplicate whatever Stanley County does in counties around the state. Patrick, you may be able to give us some guidance on, what the scope or potential might be and how many of the community colleges would have an interest in this and where strategically it might be best to place those. I'm certain that, Nate's folks may, and Gerald, who was it in Nate's group that was on point for this? Was that
Emily?
Emily.
I can't recall her last name right now, but I just recall Emily. I can probably look it up.
Keith, but you've hit the nail on the head. Obviously, what we'd like to do is take what Gerald has started and has begun to incubate there in Stanley County and see if we can't make that same available across the state to help, sort of level out. Right now, quite honestly, it's a revolving door for most of the contractors that are doing build out. They'll hire a guy for X amount of money. Somebody from Tennessee or Georgia or South Carolina or wherever will come in and try to snipe those folks, once word gets out that somebody knows how to do that. And obviously the fix is to bring more folks into the workforce that are capable of doing this type work. And so I'm looking forward to Gerald being able to get this off the ground and making some headway.
Thank you.
So if I may, I just have a question. So I know the community college system with its sort of propellancy vision definitely has an IT component, and they've been asking for funds, and there were funds put in both by the governor, and I believe they have funds in both the House and Senate bills that are out. And I'm just wondering if folks have had conversations with Dr. Cox about how to, assuming funding actually does get to them at some point this year, but how they go about assigning some of that funding to that IT component and do some of the things that you all are talking about.
So, Gerald, do you want to field that question? Or?
Well, part of, at least here, what she said I was here was interrupted. So, let me just say, I think she was asking, had anyone approached Dr. Cox about this, or actually Mr. Hahn? I've had the opportunity to speak briefly with Dr. Cox at a conference last month and just told him what we were planning on doing. He seemed interested, but at that point, The college had not given me a commitment. We have a commitment now. We have a pathway, working with the Communication Workers of America. I mentioned Kevin Salata. This guy, that's what he does across the country. And he has put the curriculum together. Obviously, with being so strong in Cisco and Palo Alto and VMware, they already had, I mentioned breaking what we were doing into two parts, and the part from DMARC to application, they do that blindfolded now. They're very good, and a lot of schools and universities are doing that as well. The component that was missing was the blue collar work, the guy running the shovel and the equipment and getting dirty, and that was shovel to DMARC. And that's what we have tried to develop. And we've got about 95% of this program already put together. So once it's put together and that we have a source of funding, in other words, that's my next step, is to get the funding, because as I mentioned, we really don't have the luxury of sitting back and waiting until these BEAD workforce development grants are available. We need to get working on it right now. So that's why I'm knocking on Golden Leaf's door and already talking to friends in the legislature about funding a pilot program. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
So that being the case, Gerald, I'm going to leave it to you to get with Keith and Patrick and get a time together. And then if other folks are interested in working with Gerald and Patrick and Keith, and if you would reach out to them or to one of us, and we'll see about putting the first meeting together for this.
Patrick and Keith, really, I need your insight, you two, more than anybody, but I welcome anyone who is interested to please get involved in this committee. I think it's very important.
Will do, Gerald. I texted our board chair, Tom Looney, and let him know we're coming. And so let's get a meeting together and get this moving. I know Stanley does outstanding work down there. Their president, second to none. Their program's top of the chart. I don't think we'll have any challenges from the community college side. Looking forward to it.
Great.
Great.
I'll
Sounds
be
good.
getting up with you guys probably the first of the week, if you don't mind. Thank you.
So next on our agenda is the ITSB roadmap, future plans. I thought what we would do is just kind of open this up to have some conversation about where we need to aim and start heading. Obviously, we're going to have an election here in 5 months and a change of the administration shortly thereafter. And so what I'd like to do is sort of divine out what we're looking to accomplish the rest of this year, knowing that there's going to be a change of administration, and then how we begin to look at the year ahead. And honestly, I'd like to ask Jim, do you have anything that you would like to see us do in the next 5 or 6 months as the current administration wraps up whatever its initiatives are? Is there anything in particular we can help with? Uh-oh. Jim is muted. I don't know if he's there or not. Do we know if he's
I think
around?
the secretary's having a little bit of technical difficulty. I'm not sure. Let me go check. I'm next
Okay.
door.
Okay. He may have run off to get a cup of coffee or something, but yeah. But, well, okay. So when Jim's able to get back on with us and give us a little bit of insight, that would be helpful. But I think what we'd like to do is try in the next several months, in addition to what both or all three committees are going to be doing, is establish a little dialogue and try to figure out what we're going to do moving forward into the new year. I think it's really incumbent on this board and its members to reach out to the extent that it has relationships or who has relationships with legislators to help educate them about really what's going on and what needs to go on going forward in DIT and in the state IT community in general. You know, when I first joined the board, it was my understanding or my belief that DIT actually controlled or managed all of the IT around the state. And obviously that is not the case at all. And so one of the things that I think would be useful and for the legislators to understand is how we integrate or get out of this sort of siloed architecture that we're in right now, because I'm betting that there is duplication of effort and expenditures across the 30 plus departments. And I think it would be useful for us to figure out, not just within DIT, but how this committee might be able to influence decision-making across all of IT, across all of the state. And so I'd be interested in folks' perspective on that. And anybody want to jump in and have a comment about how we think we orchestrate what we're going to try to get done in the next 6 months, and then really to set ourselves up for what we might be able to accomplish in the long session next year.
And Rocco,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Keith, you go first. I'm going to second.
Well, I guess you got the two Keiths in unison here, Rocco. So I think it's a big year for the board personally. So as you mentioned, you're leading in the long session. You have an election coming up. You have a transition team that's going to be developed. As you have a gubernatorial change, I think there's some potential involvement that the board could have with the transition team. But I think leading into that legislative session, long session, I think is really what we should be aiming towards in the next year.
Keith, obviously we're of like mind on that. I think we can start preparing now for what we really need to do next year. And, you know, you may have a different perspective, but my perspective on this to this point is that we have not really done that to this point. We've sort of been focused on in focal points, but in terms of being a strategy board and making recommendation, I think we have to be more engaged with the legislature and with the legislators and bringing to their attention things that we think would be helpful in moving the process forward in all of IT across the state.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up for Keith's comments, and Rocco, I do agree with your point of view. In light of this agenda topic, I kind of went back through the bylaws that we have, and in section 1 of Article 2 around the powers and duties, there are some really well written areas that talk about our responsibility to this point. And so I'd advise the board to go out and take another look at that, because I think it aligns very well with what we're seeing right now.
Thank you, Keith. I think that's a good point. It would be useful for everybody just to read through our bylaws to, you know, sort of recenter on what we're actually looking to accomplish. Has Jim, Jim, there you are. So early, one of my first questions in opening this up was, is there anything in the next 6 months that the board can do to help or assist you with whatever you're looking to try to accomplish before the end of the current administration?
I know we have some things that might be in the upcoming budget, whether or not it passes or comes to fruition. There's some very positive things that are in there for DIT. So continuation of that theme would be very helpful. We have a lot of work to still get done. And so one of the things that I've been trying to just caution some folks is that that's great, but if I'm getting funding that has to be spent before the end of June of next year, keep in mind that we have only about 6 months remaining of the administration. We don't know what January 1st and beyond is going to bring, so I have to look at the next 6 months. And we cannot necessarily take on more work right now, even though funding would be made available. It would just be, we would implode. I hate to say it any other way. We have a lot of critical stuff that needs to get done here over the next couple of months, and we're tracking along to get that work done. And so that's my commitment. When you all start talking about the next long session, I just want to caution and add a caveat out there that what happens sometimes is direct conversations with legislators ends up with things being put in a budget that we otherwise have no advance warning to, nor are we resourced or equipped to do it. And that ends up being a failure. So I would just ask that if in fact the board's going to take a more proactive approach with legislature, that you please make sure that this agency, whether it's me or somebody else post January 1st is sitting in this chair, that there's active involvement in that, because that's still going to end up with a bad outcome if in fact it's a more of a direct one-on-one communication and not a collaborative team approach moving forward. As Rocco knows, he and I had a long conversation a few weeks ago over an evening, and I think the area that this board could be very beneficial for is actually helping move forward with the agenda, moving forward with the strategic plan and the things that we're trying to get accomplished. I'm not sure that we have been successful in that effort thus far. I would just encourage all of you, going back to Keith's point about reading what's in the charter, please take a look at that, take that to heart. Because there's a lot of things that are trying to be accomplished here that if we had a little support in some key areas would have been very beneficial overall for the state. So I think I'll stop there, Rocco, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jim. And I certainly understand what you're saying. And quite honestly, that really was my point. Not looking to introduce additional things to try to put on your schedule or for you to get done, but honestly, if there are things that you think you're close to the finish line and maybe a conversation with some key folks would help, then, would be interested in having you, give us whatever information we need to be able to help you champion those things here as we approach the end of year. And quite honestly, that was my point with that. So happy to hear on anything that you might need some help or support on. And for those of us that are talking to legislators, we certainly want to advocate for the things that you need to try to get accomplished. Anybody have any other comments or suggestion? We're going to open up for other business. That if anybody has any comments they'd like to make at this point, now would be the time to do it. Sounds like everybody's ready to get off with their summer plans. So there being no other objection, I think we're going to declare the meeting adjourned.
Great. Thanks, Rocco.
Thanks, folks.
Everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.